Cool. I am live. And when you come and join, say hi. And if you're watching the recording, pop a hi as well. So today I am actually renaming, because having given some thought into what we're going to be covering today in today's Collapse broadcast, I realized that the name was too tame for the depth that we're going to go on this session today. So the industry needs you to think that you are the problem, because the pattern was returning. The pattern that kept returning was the evidence. The old model is used against you. So that is the theme for today's Collapse broadcast. So welcome. I'm Judy V. As always, I'm not here to teach you anything. I'm here to name what should already be broken by now. And today I want to speak about something that I think millions of people have privately felt for years, but I've almost never heard said cleanly. Hello. You've done the work. You got the insight. You understand or understood the pattern. You've learned the language. You've seen the wound. You've named the fear. You've traced the history. You've understood the coping. You've understood the attachment. You've understood the trauma language. You've understood the pattern so well, you could practically teach a masterclass on your own suffering. And the pattern still returned. That should have broken the old model by now. It should have broken it completely. Because if awareness was the mechanism, like I said in the last Collapse broadcast, a lot more people would already be free. If insight was the mechanism, the pattern would end the moment it became conscious. If explanation was the mechanism, people would not still be living inside the same loop after years of work, years of effort, years of money, years of trying, years of doing all the right things in all the right ways. But that is not what people are living in. What people are living in, or what people are living is this. They know the pattern. They can describe it in exquisite detail. They can tell you when it started. They can tell you how it started, why it started, what it's linked to, what sits underneath it, what trauma shaped it, what attachment style reflects it, what their coach said, what their healer said, what their inner child needs, what the somatic pattern is, what their money block is, what their abandonment response is, and still under pressure, the same move appears. The same hesitation, the same self-betrayal, the same shrinking, the same stop-start pattern, the same money collapse and relationship collapse, the same softness where truth should have held, the same bracing, the same self-management, the same level of management of life rather than the living of life. Here is the part that people keep circling around, but rarely or never say outright. For many people, the pattern returning did not break trust in the method. It also broke trust in themselves. And that is the first tragedy. That's the first violence. Because the promise was clear. Become aware enough, become conscious enough, become healed enough, become regulated enough, embodied enough, and understand enough, process enough, integrate, release, reframe, all of that. And eventually the pattern will stop. That was the promise. And when the pattern did not stop, that should have called the promise into question. Instead, it called the person into question. It called you into question. And that is where the trap seals itself. Because every time the loop returned what people were told, there's more to understand. There's more to process. There's more to heal. There's more subconscious material to uncover. There's more embodiment needed. There's more nervous system work needed. There's more safety required. All of that noise, more shadow, more depth, more regulation, more inner work, all of that. And I can tell you with a fair amount of credibility, that is not true. I can tell you that not only from 2 or more decades of research, observation, and working with this topic, but also my own personal experience. So the return of the pattern was never treated as valid evidence that the model had failed. It was treated as evidence that the person, you, had not done enough yet. I don't know about you, but for me, the time is now for that to stop. Because if the person had changed, the method worked, right? If the person did not change, it's not that the method didn't work, it was the person that had to do more work, which means the model protects itself by blaming the person. That's not wisdom, that's not depth, and that's not truth. That is in itself a closed loop. That is a system that converts recurrence into customer retention. That is a frame that survives by making sure the person never gets to use the return of the pattern as a valid piece of evidence. Because the moment the person says, wait a minute, I understand more than ever, yet I'm still producing the same life, then the whole frame is in danger. The whole model is in danger. So the frame, the model, has an answer ready. No, that does not mean the intervention point was wrong. It means you still have more to do. That, I am telling you, is the lie. And that is how people get trapped for years. Not because they are incapable of change or unwilling or unable, but because they were placed inside a system where every failure of the method was translated into failure of the person. That is a profound distortion. And now to go a little bit deeper into a more critical piece. I put it to you, the return of the pattern was a signal, a real signal, a true signal. But the old model trained people to mistranslate that signal. The signal was saying, this intervention is not reaching what generates the behavior. But what did the person learn to hear when that signal presented itself? You are resisting, you are blocked, you are afraid, you are not ready, you are self-sabotaging. Oh, you need more healing, you need more integration, it hasn't landed yet. You're not embodied. You haven't gone deep enough yet. Whereas that signal was true, the interpretation of the signal was false. And that is one of the most consequential distortions in the whole modern field of change work. Because the person did not only lose money, they lost authority of their own signal. They felt something was off. They felt, I understand more than ever, the same thing still happens. I can describe myself better than ever. I am still living inside the same architecture. I have more language than ever, and I am not free. I sound more conscious than ever, and under pressure, the same structure still takes over. That feeling, that signal was not confusion. That feeling was truth. But the model, how we have been conditioned, has already trained people to override it. The model taught them to mistrust the evidence and call that growth. It taught them to mistrust the return of the pattern and call it depth. It taught them to read repeated output as proof of personal insufficiency rather than proof of a wrong intervention point. And this is not a small mistake. That is the whole theft. Because when a person loses trust in their own signal, they become infinitely retainable. Keep buying, keep reading, keep processing, keep naming, keep regulating, keep turning inward, and keep circling. They keep trying to become the person who will finally make the method work. And meanwhile, the actual generator of behavior remains untouched. And that is why this is not just about whether a method helps or does not help. This is about whether a whole model has normalized recurrence while calling it progress. And people know that. They know this in their bones. Even if they have never articulated it in this way. They know what it is to become descriptively sophisticated without becoming free. They know what it is to gain an elegant vocabulary for the loop while still obeying it. They know what it is to sound healed and still disappear when it matters. They know what it is to know exactly why they do the thing and still do the thing. This is one of the biggest public illusions right now. Better self-description gets mistaken for structural change. People become more articulate, more psychologically aware, more emotionally fluent, more conceptually precise, more skilled at naming what is happening. And because that sounds impressive, it often gets mistaken for freedom. No. A more elegant explanation of the loop is still the loop. A more refined description of self-betrayal is still self-betrayal. A more conscious story about the same recurring output is still the same recurring output. You can say, I know this is my abandonment wound, and still choose the same distorted structure. You can say, I know I'm dysregulated, and still produce the same life. You can say, I understand this comes from my childhood, and obey it in your body, in your relationships, in your money, in your visibility, in your timing, in your choices. That is not freedom. That is descriptive sophistication. And descriptive sophistication has become one of the most seductive traps in the modern change industry, because it feels like movement. It sounds like movement. It even looks like movement. And more than that, it actually gives relief. It gives people something to say. It gives relief for a minute, because there's the dopamine. the adrenaline rush. It gives them a story that appears deeper, appears more refined and more nuanced. But a better story about the same loop is still the same loop. And if this sounds brutal, it should. Because the cost has been brutal. I want to speak a bit about the cost for a moment. And I'm not just talking about money. Although, yes, money matters. I'm talking about the courses, the programs, the coaches, the healers, the practitioners, the retreats, the trainings, the memberships, the frameworks, the subscriptions, the next promising methodology, the next hopeful investment, all of that. Yes, the money matters. But the greater theft is not money. It's the greater theft was life, years of life. Years spent circling a promise that never had the mechanism. Years spent behaving that the answer was still just one layer further in. Years spent postponing movement because the person thought there was still something to resolve first. Years spent managing life instead of living life. Years spent not trusting your signal because it's been distorted by a narrative. Years spent not speaking, not leaving, not choosing, not building, not risking, not entering visibility, not trusting truth, not trusting the body's signal, not trusting the directness of what you already know. Years spent managing self. You are not here to manage self. You are here to live life. You're not here to monitor self, regulate self, interpret self, question self, correct self. You are here to live life. Trying to produce safety inside of self before entering life is the lie. The cost is enormous. Relationships lived below truth, work lived below capacity, money not made, visibility withheld, vitality consumed by internal management, authority eroded, self-trust dismantled. And maybe the most obscene part of all of that, hope kept getting used to keep people inside the cycle. Maybe the next thing will be it. Maybe this is the next breakthrough. Maybe this is the next realization or the next embodiment practice. Oh, the common one, the next shift in frequency. So the person does not just keep paying, they keep on waiting for a life that should already have started moving, waiting for permission from a method that never reached the level that generated the behavior in the first place. So the old model did not merely fail to free people. It trained them to call failure depth. It trained them to call recurrence a sign that more healing was needed. It trained them to call delay wisdom, or call self-doubt a nuance, or to train them to call unresolved output as the next layer. And this is why people stay so long, because the frame has found a way, or the model has found a way to metabolize its own failure and sell it back as progress. That is the mechanism of retention. And this is why so many people end up exhausted, ashamed, privately disorientated after years of sincere work. because they were taught to read the evidence through a false frame. The problem is not always that you did not go deep enough. The problem is that the intervention point was wrong. There's the break. There's the issue. If behavior is being generated through one system and you keep on intervening in another, the same output is going to keep returning. Not because there's some endless depth of unresolved material. There isn't. It's because you're acting downstream from the generator. You're trying to change output through interpretation. You're trying to reorganize behavior through meaning, through story, belief, emotional narration, reframing, regulation, even self-description. And those things may change how the person understands themselves. They may change how they talk about themselves. They may even create temporary relief. But explanation is not reorganization, and description is not generation. Interpretation is not the same thing as acting on the mechanism that is producing the behavior. And that is why someone can feel better and still not move. Feeling better is one thing, moving is another. This is why people can speak beautifully and still betray themselves in action. That's why they can know and they can know and they can know and still remain inside the same structure. This is where the old question has to die. Because the question now is no longer, hear me, what does this pattern mean? What wound is underneath it? What belief is underneath it? What is the story? What part is active? What do I still need to do or still need to understand? Or why do I still do this? Those are not the questions. The real question becomes very simply, and as my clients often even say, sounds too simple. What is generating this behavior? That's the real question. That is the threshold. And that is where the old frame starts collapsing. And that is where my work begins. Human behavior is not primarily psychological. It is generated by how signal is routed through the body. It's not because psychology sees nothing, or it's not because psychology is pointless, but because psychology describes behavior. It does not go far enough into what generates it. Behavior is output. It is not origin. The old model addresses output. Because the body is not primarily a story-making machine. It is a routing system. Signal routes. Physiology responds, and from that behavior emerges and interpretation follows. So if you're still trying to produce freedom through interpretation, while the body is still routing the same signals through the same pathways, under the same conditions, then you are intervening downstream from the generator. And that is why so much work does not hold. That is why people can understand the pattern and still live inside it. That is why they can sound conscious and still repeat it. That's why they can know the loop and still obey it. The issue is not that they don't have enough intelligence. It's not that they lack sincerity. It's not that they don't try hard enough. It's not that they did not spend enough. It's the old model has acted at the level of description, while the behavior was being generated elsewhere. And then the worst part, it then taught people to misread the return of the pattern, mistrust the truth of the signal, and blame themselves for not getting it right. Are you seeing the loop here? And that is what ends here. Now, if this is landing, I want to be very precise about what I am saying. I'm not saying people imagine their patterns. I'm not saying there is no value in description. I'm not saying insight sees nothing. I am saying insight was never the mechanism. Description was never the generator. And a person cannot be freed by a model that keeps asking them to solve behavior at the level of explanation. When behavior is being generated through routing, explanation is not where you need to work. And that is why the Codex System begins somewhere else, not with meaning or coaching or healing, not with a better story about the same loop, but with generation, with structure, with routing. And if you're hearing this and feeling that strange combination of relief and anger, that makes sense. Relief because part of you has always known something was off. Anger because of the years may have been lost, because of years that may have been lost, while the evidence was used against you. The anger is not a problem. It may be the first clean signal that you've trusted in a long time. So, if you want to go further into this, next week on the 21st of April, I'm doing a deep dive. Why you do what you do and why insight has not changed it. And in that deep dive, I'm going to show you where the old model actually breaks, what behavior is really being generated from, and why so much work has never held, and precisely how the process failed you. As we know, it was failed because it was acting on description, not on generation. And you were not confused because the truth was unclear. You were confused because the signal was being translated through a false frame. The pattern was not hiding the truth from you. It was showing it to you. And the moment you stop reading recurrence as personal insufficiency and start reading it as structural evidence, the old model loses its hold. So if you're done being told the return of the pattern means you still need to do more work, and you're ready to see where the mechanism actually is, join me for the deep dive. I will share the link in the description of this of the replay of this broadcast. And I want to leave you with this. The pattern returning was not proof that you failed. It was the evidence. And the old model was used against you. And I look forward to seeing you on the call next week. Thank you for joining.